Hello and welcome to the Lords of the Sith podcast. My name is Lee and I'm here with Denise. Today we're going to be talking about some Reylo-tastic leaks of doom that have come out recently. And we're going to start talking about some of our initial predictions for episode 9. Before we get into that future stuff, why don't we talk a little bit about the leaks, Denise?
Tell me about the leaks. I heard about it.
Oh,
but
God.
tell me about it.
Well,
what
the
is
leaks,
it?
and I'm doing air quotes right now, the leaks. We've been asked about this for such a long time, but we've kind of been not really impressed by the leaks, so we didn't really want to do a whole thing about it, but we really keep getting emails and questions and all that, so I think it's time to address it. So what happened, for those of you who don't know, is that a user on Reddit posted leaks about episode 9, and he claims to have seen the storyboards for episode 9, early kind of drafts and storyboards, and he has a tiny bit of credibility because he did post leaks for The Last Jedi, and out of the 25 things that he said, 2 of them actually happened.
Wow.
So he did predict that Kylo Ren is going to kill Snoke. He actually said that Rose was going to be a refugee. Also, for the episode 9 leaks, he said, a whole bunch of stuff about refugees and people seeking help from Rey that were displaced, and it just sounds like a lot of current events stuff. Essentially, he claims that Rey and Kylo Ren they had a secret Force baby.
Isn't it through the hand thing? They touched hands and then she got pregnant. This is what I heard. It's hilarious. It's amazing.
I mean, yeah. I guess Kylo shouldn't have taken his glove off. You don't do it without your glove on. There's a lot of diseases and you got to use protection. Come on. What he claims is that they have maintained their ability to force project onto each other and Force Skype, but with actual physical contact.
They can actually do it.
And they actually did it, yeah. And so they're in love with each other, but Kylo Ren is, eviler and eviler. Now he's actually enslaving people and he's maintaining a facade of being a benign dictator and everybody's happy, but really what he's doing is he's harvesting Force energy from a planet in the unknown regions or something. And only a handful of people know about it, Poe, Rey, and Leia, and they're trying to stop him. But when he finds out that he has a secret love child with Rey, because she never told him that she had a baby. She raised the kid as if it were a refugee baby and didn't tell anybody it was her own baby. And the baby's always with her. And then when Kylo finds out, he almost kills Rey. And then Leia has to stop him. It sounds like a really bad soap opera.
And also it talks, I think, about a 5-year time skip, which I think is too long because they would want to keep these characters young. And I guess because they wanted the child, right? Because everybody loves little kids in Star Wars. So they definitely want to put
it's so lame. It's really, first of all, why would Rey want to be the baby mama to the evil dictator? That does such a disservice to her character. I want Reylo, but this is not how we want it to be played out, and especially not domestic violence between Rey and Kylo. Kylo Ren is supposed to learn from Anakin's mistakes, not try to force choke his baby mama like Anakin did. It's ridiculous. It really doesn't make any sense. And I just, I don't think so. Now, that being said, a lot of people are giving, like I said, credence to what this person is saying because he got things right out of The Last Jedi. Right. But you know how you have 1,000 monkeys typing, they're eventually going to write a Shakespeare novel? It's okay, you can be right about 2 things. It doesn't mean that you actually are legit. Yeah. That being said, also maybe the person did see an early storyboard and he just totally misinterpreted, what was the plan, or maybe it was the storyline and then things changed. So we just don't know enough at this point. But even in these crack leaks, it's still Reylo. That's still the end game,
Of course.
So
but I think at this point, it's bound to have lots of leaks. I think in The Force Awakens, something happened that indeed the whole plot was leaked, but that was special. And I remember for The Last Jedi there was also a lot of speculation around this time, and most of it was just bonkers. And I think that's the case with this. That's what it seems.
Well, I think part of why people are so nervous is because a lot of what was said about The Last Jedi, Kylo kills Snoke, Rey is nobody. It's stuff that the average person wouldn't have believed. And so when it came out as a little leaks here and there, people were just like, no way. The stuff about Luke, people are like, no, absolutely not. So now they're hearing all this weird stuff and they're like, wow, maybe it's really what's going to happen in episode 9. But, guys, it just doesn't go with what was there before. It doesn't really kind of follow the projection of the character storylines. And also, at the end of the day, it's a fairy tale. Really, baby mama gets choked by her dictator boyfriend. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So
yeah, I think that it doesn't make any sense. We're gonna hear a lot of yarn. I also remember that we started getting for The Last Jedi the first reliable spoilers when there was the shooting in Ireland, but even then people claimed they saw Luke Skywalker take the green lightsaber and kill all the Knights of Ren. And also I remember they said that Luke told Rey that she had to kill Kylo, and a lot of people were nervous or believed it, and it didn't make sense either, right? I love Obi-Wan, but for Luke to not only want to kill his nephew, want to make Rey a murderer didn't make any sense. But some of it was true, but I think a lot of things get misinterpreted, even though maybe they saw it. And I also remember from leaks and speculation, for example, we didn't have Snoke being killed except by this guy who I think was just lucky, and a lot of things were not in those spoilers and leaks.
What I think is that there might be a grain of truth, at the bottom of this. Like, maybe some of this stuff was really in the early storyboards, but so much can change between when they first put a story together and the finished product. And also, people just make up a lot of stuff. So maybe somebody heard one thing and then they built this whole other thing around it. I guess a lot of people are worried because they don't like the way that Reylo would be portrayed if that were to be the case. I would not worry. I don't think that we'll see something like that in episode 9. Just going by what has been going on and what they're aiming for with the characters, it just doesn't really look like something credible to me.
Yeah, it doesn't look credible to me. And if you're going to go by people who got things right, hey, we got things right, come on.
We got plenty of stuff right, actually. We should be if you look at our bingo cards, we got a lot right.
Yeah, I think, but we're gonna see a lot of stuff like that, and at some point you have to just wait for the movie, which I know it's a little, you want some news before, right?
It's a long way. Yeah,
actually, even we did some speculation that was based on the Ireland shoots, and we thought, like, for example, that Kylo would go to there and everything. So there was room for misinterpreting things, I think.
Yeah, but the other thing is that you never really know. Maybe at some point Luke did tell Rey that she had to kill Kylo, originally, and then they kind of undid that for the movie, because it doesn't make any sense, and they had already pushed the envelope far enough with Luke. So they were like, no, we can't go that far. So who knows? Maybe some of it is true, possible. But even if it's true, it doesn't mean that it's going to be in the finished product.
Okay, so that's BS, right? That's what I think for this leak.
It's FAF, fake as you know what. So another leak came out recently where they were saying that I guess Ben wants to find Rey. He's obsessed about finding Rey and the Resistance, and then he ends up leaving, and Hux takes over the First Order, and then Ben and Rey end up together, and then he dies, and then the Force ghosts come and hold hands and chant around him. I'm making that part up, but the point is the Force ghosts revive him, and then he lives, and then Rey and Ben bring balance to the Force. But then there's a whole bunch of crap about like Phasma kills Rose and blah blah blah, ridiculousness. The point is everything's coming up Reylo, you guys. Even the fake ass leakers are making it Reylo because that's what this is about.
So that's fake. Okay, so we can maybe make some predictions based on what we have for episode 9. What do you think about the time skip? Will there be one?
I think there's going to be a time jump for sure. I just don't think 5 years makes sense.
Nope.
I think that most likely it's going to be like 1 to 2 years. And I do think that Rey and Kylo Ren are going to maintain their Force connection. So that part doesn't surprise me. The idea that they could secretly be communicating. And I still believe, and maybe this is just wishful thinking, I see some potential for conflict brewing between Rey and the Resistance when they find out, what's going on between Rey and Kylo and what may still be going on. So I think that especially Poe would not be pleased. You know, some things in his comics have hinted at the fact that he and Rey are kind of, you know, bonding over being force tortured, which is just ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's thinking he and Rey are on the same page about Kylo Ren being a dickhead. And then if he finds out that, guess what, actually Rey is, you know, like in love with Kylo, I think he would be really confused and angry. You know, he just wouldn't understand how she could have compassion or empathy for somebody like him. So I can see some conflict there.
Yeah, on the time skip, definitely, because The Last Jedi was the only one that didn't have a time skip. And now because of the plot, you know, you want to have some time for Kylo. You know, you don't want to do the day after when Kylo took over the First Order. Now, what you're talking about Poe in the comics, I looked at it and it had something really wrong because she said, I was tortured in his ship. And, you know, it wasn't there. It was at Starkiller Base that he was whatever. So, you know, I don't know. The person who wrote it, I guess, didn't even watch The Force Awakens. I'm just kidding.
I actually didn't like so much that there were potential hints about Poe being force sensitive in that comic. But then, I mean, really, it's like, really, Poe's gonna do everything. I don't know. But aside from that, then afterwards, like on Twitter, one of the guys from the creative team, he was like, that's not how the Force works. So I don't really put too much stock in that possibility either, and it really doesn't make sense from a story standpoint because Poe is already like a pilot in the Resistance. He's on the plot B side firmly, so he doesn't really need to jump over to the Force plot, and I think a lot of us don't want him there to be on. No offense to Poe lovers, but less is more when it comes to
I like Poe. But I think that's not his plot. And one thing that I think it's sad for you because it seems that you don't really like him. I think he's still going to have a strong role because it has such a, you know, so much space in the comics and in the extra material.
Poe's a character that's good for this time between movies where, you know, you can't talk too much about the main people. So you have Poe that you can kind of like build stuff around so that you can insert hints about what can happen. Like in the comic, they're already hinting out how Leia's going to go in episode 9. Like, Leia has to have a conversation with Poe, but then she's tired, she's got to lay down, you know, she's been exposed to radiation. So it already tells you that she's not going to be around for long. We knew that. It's very smart to use the comics to kind of bridge a little bit between materials. I don't think it's a sign that he's going to be all that important. I think of Poe as kind of like leeching off Finn and Kylo Ren. Because he's there, they get less story time. They get less attention and focus. Like, we should be really more focused on Finn than Poe because Finn is one of the main leads in The Force Awakens, whereas Poe's just, you know, going, we're going to hit him with everything we've got. And that's how I like him, you know? That's just my opinion.
I just think, you know, I think he's growing, and I think, for example, that having him, like, for example, as leader of the Resistance is something that's possible, right? Sure. And he would be filling Leia's shoes, and it's interesting because in the first movie, he's like doing kind of Leia's from A New Hope.
But we have Finn, right? So we don't need too many cooks. We don't need too many leaders. Poe wasn't supposed to survive The Force Awakens, so when you think about who the natural leader for the Resistance is, I think it was always meant to be Finn. At one point I thought Poe and Finn would split the role, but now I'm thinking Poe is probably gonna end up completing the arc he was supposed to complete in The Force Awakens, and he'll make some noble sacrifice or whatever. And the reason I think that is because, as I said, I think he's gonna have conflict with Rey over her relationship with Kylo. So if he ends up being like a bit of an antagonist, then in a way he can balance out and kind of redeem himself in a way that he didn't do successfully in The Last Jedi. So I think it all works out. I know that Leia chose Poe to be the leader of the Resistance, but I don't know that means that he's necessarily the right person for the role. For me, Finn has better qualities as a leader than Poe does.
I'd like to see more of Finn, but that's not what it looks like.
We'll see. I'm still hoping for that, like, Stormtrooper rebellion.
Yeah.
What else do you predict for 9?
Oh, for Leia, you know, because some people really hope for a recast. And I heard Kathleen Kennedy at the 4th panel, she was saying, you know, Carrie Fisher was Leia. So no recast, but, you know, they could do something with voice a little bit, you know, like they can still have Leia in 9, not have her, but have her presence, you know, with voice, like in the Clone Wars, for example. I know that we have Yoda, he hears Qui-Gon, and there's something that happens. They could just use a scene. They could have a little bit of her based on what they have, but they're not gonna have a recast.
Yeah, I doubt it. There was some rumor about Meryl Streep. I don't expect anything like that. I do think there's going to be a Leia presence. They don't have to put her facing the camera, but Leia voice, Leia messages or whatever, and eventually an off-screen death in the best Akbar style, I guess.
Yeah.
But this is a very interesting situation that they've put themselves in by not adjusting things in The Last Jedi. We'll see how they work themselves out of that.
Oh, but I liked it. I liked that ending. And I see, like at least we got her entire performance, and I think they can adjust it. They wouldn't have been able to film a death scene before, like it already happened too late. Okay, so next thing we can predict a little bit is Rey and Kylo. So what do you think is gonna happen?
I think there's gonna be romance, and I think there's gonna be an awesome kiss. But kidding aside, okay, definitely I want these things to happen, but I'm also going by what the story is telling us so far. So, we were joking earlier that our bingo cards were right. And how did we do that? We didn't consult the bones. We didn't consult the tea leaves. We knew what was going to happen because we followed storytelling guidelines, right? I'm not here to drag anybody who wanted Rey to be Luke's daughter, because I can understand why they wanted it. But at the same time, that's not what the story was telling us. People who were following the story rather than what they wanted to see happen weren't shocked when it turned out that Rey Walker was debunked. In fact, they didn't expect anything but Rey Walker to be debunked because the signs were there from the beginning. By the same token, those of us who expected Reylo were doing so not just because we wanted to see it happen, but because that was where the story was pointing. And I hear people say, there's no way to know what's going to happen. It's true that The Last Jedi took some shocking twists that did not follow the rules of storytelling, absolutely broke the mold, and that's something that a lot of people really liked about it, and others not so much, right? Bottom line, it's true. Until you're sitting there in the theater looking at it with your own two eyes, you have no guarantees. But at the same time, the story is heading in a direction, and we can predict, where things are going to end up. We're going in a sexy direction with Reylo. There's no question of that in my mind. For me, when we're trying to tease out the central theme here, we have to take into account that they keep hammering this point about the light and the dark as necessary components to the Force that need to be in harmony with each other in a sense. So that keeps coming up. It was actually in The Force Awakens. We saw that yin and yang symbolism, and we saw it also in The Last Jedi. Also, in Poe's comics, it has come up on 2 occasions that I know of where they were highlighting this duality of the nature of the Force. And to me, that means something. Recently, C-3PO and Rey share a scene where he's translating the Jedi text, which unfortunately it was not Kylo. But maybe, there's still a lot to be translated yet, so maybe eventually. But the point is that C-3PO tells Rey, the light, the dark, they both are in the Force together. Yeah, no kidding. We're talking about Rey and Kylo as embodiment of the light and the dark side of the Force, and that their joining together brings balance. And we know that Rey and Kylo Ren are not related. Then their joining to bring balance to the Force, metaphorically speaking, is going to be through love and sexual union. I mean, that's not a daring, bold prediction. I mean, that's just kind of obvious at this point. And if you think about a child being the perfect expression of balance between 2 sets of DNA, then I think a Reylo baby is a foregone conclusion. For me, the main theme of the sequel trilogy is going to end up being redemptive love. Both the Jedi and the Sith are rejecting love and attachment for different reasons. The Sith, because they want to focus on negative energy, so anger, fear, and they want to tap into that so that they can amplify their Force power, and that's their shortcut, right? Whereas the Jedi, they are so afraid of the darkness inside of them that they opted for completely disavowing emotions and love. And Anakin, he says that love is compassion and therefore the Jedi are encouraged to love. I mean, that's bullshit. Anakin is an expert at twisting semantics so that he can make up his terrible pickup lines that work on Padme for whatever reason. Oh, sand is rough, your shoulder's so smooth though. And the Jedi are encouraged to love. That's not true, Anakin. Give me a break. The reality is the Jedi are encouraged to not love. They're encouraged to not be attached. You know, when you think about how they treated Anakin when he was a child, I think a lot of his issues are rooted in that, by the way, in the way that they rejected him and try to shame him over being afraid and angry about the situation that he was in, you know, missing his mother and wanting to be with her. They do that over and over again. I mean, we saw it with Ahsoka. We saw it even with Luke. I mean, I love Yoda, don't get me wrong. Yoda's actually one of my favorite characters, but at the same time, I'm really angry at Yoda because he really, really messed up. Like, if the greatest teacher is failure, then Master Yoda has like 10 gold stars at this point, even after realizing that he had been blind to the point that he didn't recognize Darth Sidious, who was under his nose the whole time. Even after that, going in exile, he still was telling Luke that he had to go kill his dad. Even Obi-Wan, who was a Force ghost by that point and is supposed to know better. You know, this is terrible advice. Like, forgo your attachment, forget about his humanity, just kill him because essentially, you know, he's a monster that's too dangerous to be left alive. That sounds remarkably like Mace Windu. When you think about it, I mean, they've learned nothing. They lost everything and they still are stuck in these antiquated ways. I mean, don't even get me started on Yoda. I will say this though. He says to Luke, there's nothing in the books that the girl Rey doesn't already have. And a lot of people are saying that he's referring to the Jedi text. And yes, he is. But I also believe that he's referring to Rey as a person who has a strong capacity to love and who is actually falling in love with Ben Solo already. And she is also a young woman who is going to probably end up being mother to the Skywalker line. So she will be able to restore the line and the temple of the Jedi. And by uniting with Kylo, she can bring balance to the Force. So she really does have everything that's needed. Some version of this is reiterated when Leia and Rey have their conversation in the final scene of The Last Jedi. We have everything we need here. And some version of that was also said by Kylo Ren when he first encountered Rey in Takodana. We have all we need. And then he swoops her in his arms and carries her off into his monster lair. So, I mean, this is not just all happening by coincidence. It's a theme that's recurring here. So, in summary, after my huge rant, what I'm getting at is that for me, the missing piece, the lesson that was missing from the Jedi text, either because it wasn't ever there to begin with, or because it was indeed in the text, but it wasn't translated appropriately, or somebody by design left it out for their own agenda. It's love. Love is the thing. I mean, the Beatles were right all along, obviously, and we're not the only ones to have talked about this before, but the Star Wars mythos and the lore has some very clear Judeo-Christian tenets built into it. So it's the framework for a lot of this Force stuff and the moral compass. It comes from a lot of these traditions. It's not that it's right or wrong, it's just the way it is. So if you go by that lens, the idea of love being the central lesson is a key thing in Christianity, as well as other religions. I mean, you hear this playing out in various different stories that are meaningful for us. The idea that, for example, Voldemort couldn't defeat Harry Potter because of love, if not in any other power. It's the strongest power that there is. It's really corny, but remember, this is a fairy tale. This is a moral story. So when you think about the Jedi with these lofty goals, you know, and with they're filled with their own self-importance, they decide to set aside love. It reminds me a lot of the Bible verse. The stone that was rejected by the builders is now the cornerstone, the center stone. That's love. You know, you guys built your whole Jedi temple without this key piece and then you crumbled. I just think it's really interesting when you think about what the fatal flaw of both the Jedi and the Sith. It's actually the same thing. It's rejecting love. So now here we have Kylo Ren, who is a very important character. That importance cannot be overstated in my opinion, because he is the embodiment of the Skywalker line. He is their legacy, and the thing that will connect the OT, the PT, and the ST is basically the fate of Kylo Ren. So there's a lot resting on this guy's shoulders. And so again, balance to the Force is going to take both Rey and Kylo, and they're going to build a new temple, which can be literally a temple if they go off and explore the Force together, or it can be through their descendant, their child. Like for me, this is just one big epic love story that's been spanning, you know, generations. And I think that a lot of people are going to be shocked to realize it. But think about it. The love story between Rey and Kylo, it's bigger than the two people who are playing it out. It's really about the Force, you know, it's about life itself. It's epic. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I'm hoping one of them dies. I'm horrible. It's just like, but I was thinking it would be cool if she died, you know, just to make it different. I I don't know. And I still think that they maybe we're gonna have them either making kids or in a position where they can make kids. So if you're watching the movie without any spoilers and midway, that did, child potentially making activities, you can say one of them is toast. If they don't, they're gonna survive because they have to be alive for the next generation of Skywalker. I just say if they do it in the middle, one of them, well, not one of them, if they just do it,
like
maybe
if they
he
sneak
dies.
away to touch hands in the middle of the movie, one of them is doomed.
Not hands, I mean, you know what I'm saying.
I don't know if that's a good method to go by, because remember in did you watch Rebels? I don't want to spoil anything if you didn't.
I didn't, but I got the spoilers.
Okay.
I wasn't crazy about it.
So spoiler alert. In Rebels, they showed these two characters acknowledge the fact that there's an attraction between them and that there's a future between them. And then they showed them almost kissing and then actually finally getting to complete the kiss. And then he dies, right? And then, like, in the years later, we see that she had a kid. Really? Was that like an immaculate conception? Like, when did they get the chance to do this? They just, I don't know. It was weird. They never made it seem as if they were intimate in that way. And then all of a sudden they have a kid together. What?
Okay, so it means that in Star Wars, kissing can generate kids. Okay, that's good to know. We do know that Shmi, it was whatever.
But I don't want Kylo to die, and I don't want Rey to die. I want them to be happy and to, study the Force and go and do their thing. So, and have babies together.
I just find it too fluffy for my taste. But on the other hand, like, maybe that's what they're going for. Like, I was mentioning about Colin Trevorrow and how the end of his movie, that indie movie that got him chosen, is like, it's hopeful, it's happy, it's not cynical. And I think Kathleen Kennedy chose him for that note for the end. So maybe that's what she's looking for.
I mean, she chose him because Brad Bird said, pick this guy, right? But I do agree with you that definitely his body of work had, at least the safety not guaranteed, because he had done other horrible stuff. But that movie in particular was his calling card, right? But I think the conversation about what's going to happen in 9 also ties in with the conversation about what's going to happen with this franchise as far as the Skywalkers. So you and I have talked about this before. We both would love to see the Skywalker episodes be kind of a generational thing. I was talking about how my mom saw the original trilogy when she was a teenager when A New Hope came out. And then I was a teenager when the prequels came out. So it's really cool. And I think that we'd love to share that with our own kids, and grandkids. So it would be so awesome if it were something that happened every 15, 20 years, that we got more Skywalker stuff. And then in between, they would do their other expansion.
I actually think that's why they have, the trilogy with Rian Johnson, that's going to occupy this middle between the Skywalker.
Right. So they're pursuing other avenues, and a lot of people are making the assumption that it means that the Skywalker line is going to be over. For me, that makes zero sense, because the Skywalker line is a cash cow, and Disney really just wants your money, So they're not going to, there's no reason to end this line and close that opportunity. So it makes sense, though, to not burn it out, not make people not care about it, and to keep it special and leave it for a generational thing. If that's the case, then I think that obviously Ben Solo has to reproduce, right? So I'm anticipating that he is going to have a child, and of course it's going to be with Rey, and then one of them can die, sure, but why couldn't they both survive and go off and have adventures together that we could hear about in later years?
Yeah, I still think one of them dies. I used to think it was going to be Kylo, but now I think, let's be creative and do Rey, I don't know.
Maybe both of them should die then.
That could be cool. They die together. But then the poor child, who's gonna raise the child? Finn! Poor Finn and Rose. Oh, okay, see, I got an idea. It's cool.
Oh God. Let's talk about Finnrose.
I think Finnrose are strong, and they're gonna, it is a couple there. What do you think?
So you're not expecting a love triangle between Rey and Finnrose, right? Or a love quadrangle?
There's nothing there. Oh, I would love a love triangle with Poe and Rose.
Oh my God,
right?
I would love that too. I think that Finn and Poe belong together. I don't care what anybody says. Like, I like Rose a lot, but I really wish that they had just let Finn and Poe be together, they obviously wanted to be in. But anyway, I don't think that there's going to be any sort of love triangle. I know a lot of people started talking about Finn Rey again after they saw The Last Jedi, but I don't see that that's an open line. You know, I think
watch The Last Jedi and that's the conclusion you get? Like, seriously?
But a lot of people are still talking about Rey and Kylo being brother and sister.
That's bad.
I don't think like hand sex between siblings is even legal, right? Like,
I mean, I think it's worse than with Luke and Leia, because, you know, with Luke and Leia, it was just a kiss, but this is like, oh my god, going, it's disturbing. Okay, yeah, no, but I think it's gonna be Finn and Rose, and they're gonna still be a cute couple. Maybe some bickering and everything, but it's really firmly in B plot. Yeah,
I don't know. I maybe I'm just being like overly optimistic as usual. But I really think that the way that the Resistance leadership is set up with Finn and Poe and Rose, they can be the head of the Resistance, you know, and set up a government. And as for Rey, I mean, I don't see her wanting to be a leader in the Resistance. I think anybody who's held a position of leadership understands that it is a very lonely thing. And so I don't think that Rey would be interested in that. I think that the main thing she wants is to find her people. She wants to belong to someone, to something. And Kylo is her person. Kylo doesn't fit in to the Resistance. He can't ever step in and take leadership over that, you know? So he has to leave. And why should he leave alone? Why should he die? Why should Rey die? There's no reason for them to not be together. So I'm already anticipating that they're going to ride off into the sunset at the end of 9.
I don't know. I still find it too fluffy, you know? Cute and fluffy. I don't know.
But think about, like, it's the end of the trilogy. It has to be happy, right?
Yeah, I think so. In a way, you know, if you think of fairy tale, maybe it makes sense.
Yeah. Do you know, I was actually rewatching the OT recently. They just played it on TBS, and even though I own it and I can watch it anytime, whenever it's on TV, I just have to watch it and I drop everything else that I'm doing. So I watched the OT, and I thought, you know, the only really true happy ending that we had was really the end of A New Hope, because it is exactly that. It's A New Hope. You have Han and Luke getting, you know, their medals. Chewie gets ignored, and I hope that he complained about that to Leia later. But, you know, it's a happy ending. There's hope. There hasn't been, I mean, Obi-Wan Kenobi died, but everything else was kind of like really looking good for them, and you didn't know which one Leia was going to end up with, so it's like pretty open-ended and happy. But even at the end of the trilogy, in The Return of the Jedi, there is a happiness and a celebration, but there's also a sadness. Like, Luke has just burned his dad, you know, his dad's corpse, and I think that's very fitting of a bittersweetness, but it's still overall a happy thing. I think that's what we can expect with Episode 9 closing out the trilogy. Overall, a happy, positive thing, but still some sadness, but not a tragic ending. I don't foresee that happening.
I don't find Return of the Jedi bittersweet. I find it so beautiful when you finally see the Force Ghost, you know, with the original one with the other Jedi, you know, and this, you know, this hope for the future and hope for redemption. And yeah, I don't know, I like it. But in a way, I like it. So maybe I would like something just as positive for the sequel trilogy. But no, I'm expecting something just as positive, you know, but it can involve death, of course.
Speaking of sexy Force ghosts, do you foresee Anakin making a cameo in Episode 9?
Please, I'm
I know, yeah. I remember when we went to Celebration, and the faft that Hayden Christensen was there, for me it was a sign that he was going to be connected to the sequel trilogy, and I thought it would be in 8, but I'm fine if it's in 9, and we just need him there. And it really, I mean, it's like a deafening silence, the fact that there's a vacuum there that Darth Vader isn't occupying. Like, where is he? He needs to speak to his grandson.
And I think a lot of people, a lot of fans, the newer fans, the fans of the prequel trilogy, of the Clone Wars, they would love to see Anakin and Hayden Christensen. You know, sometimes I find that these decisions are being made by directors that are old. I don't mean to criticize anybody. I'm not that young either. But, you know, they have their ideas idea of what Star Wars is. But, there's this whole new generation, and they'll be thrilled to see Hayden Christensen, and I would be thrilled.
No, I actually am a little bit more optimistic in that regard. I think that the creative team has a very strong awareness of the fact, and I say it after hearing Pablo Hidalgo's remarks at a Comic-Con in Chile that happened, I think 2 years ago or a year ago, where he was saying this thing about the prequels being universally hated, that's not true anymore. The people who were growing up when the prequels came out, like myself, that was my Star Wars, because I wasn't alive when the OT came out. So I watched and I loved it, but the ones that were mine were the ones that I got to see in the theater. And I love the prequels. I know they're awful, but I love them. I love them to bits, and I love Anakin and throughout his lifespan. And the kids who are younger, like the little kids who are preteens now, they're the ones that are the TV series generation. So that's what they know, So I don't think that it's true that everybody hates the prequels. And I think that Disney Lucasfilm knows that. And plus, they want to tie in all the products together, right? To keep the longevity going, the cash, flowing. So I think it makes perfect sense to tie Anakin into the ST. And I'm really, really hoping that we'll get to see that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. So I hope so too.
Well, Denise, I wanted to ask you, because this is something that, again, keeps coming up, with regard to people being worried about Reylo because of the backlash against The Last Jedi, the backlash against the Solo movie, and angry fans in general. People saying, well, they were heading in a Reylo direction, but now they're going to, undo that, and they're going to do something else. What do you think about that?
There isn't anything else that they could do, what they could do. At this point, they're stuck into a corner, and it's either Reylo, or they're gonna ruin everything that they've done, because what can they have in terms of plot? Because The Last Jedi, the highlight was Reylo, that's what everybody liked, or at least didn't hate. And that since The Force Awakens was about these two people, so they're definitely going Reylo. It could be tragic though, there's this possibility.
I think it could be tragic. I just don't see it happening, but maybe because I'm in denial. But
no, but it's still gonna be romantic, and it's still gonna be Reylo, because it's a fairy tale. What do you have in a fairy tale? And if you think about Star Wars and what it is, there is no room for them at this point to change course and do something else.
I agree with that. I think you're right. I have not had any doubt about Reylo being canon since I saw The Force Awakens, and I thought the real danger was during that period where they could have, it was early days, it was a lot of subtext, right, and things that flew over the head of a lot of people. They could have potentially undone Reylo and gone in a different direction with Episode 8. But after what we saw in 8, after the commentary by the creative team about, this was the closest we'll get to sex in Star Wars, people still thinking that they're going to be siblings. It's like, really? So I have no doubt that things are heading in a Reylo direction. I don't see why people are worried about the backlash. I think a lot of people just hear, people hate The Last Jedi, and because they saw Reylo as the main focus of The Last Jedi, they assume that means that the backlash is against Reylo. First of all, there are Reylos that hate The Last Jedi. Aside from that, even people who really legitimately hated The Last Jedi and thought that it had very little redeeming content liked the Reylo aspect of it. Even like the bros, they love the Reylo aspect of it. So there's no backlash against Reylo. There's a minor one that has kind of always been there, because there's people that have their own agendas. So we'll see. I don't really think we have anything to worry about as far as Reylo being undone because of a backlash. If it were Colin still at the helm of 9, I might have, some doubt, because I don't know if he's a Reylo. But JJ is the original Reylo. So it's like, there's nothing to worry about, I don't think. As far as it happening now, whether it's tragic, whether it's happy, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think, for example, you talked about siblings. I think siblings could have been a cool story in the sense that there would be some love and, conflict, right, between these two people. It could have been cool, but like I said, at this point they cannot retcon and make them siblings. So what else can they do? Especially there is no story left, and what we got there was, there's a lot of things to happen, but the core of the sequel trilogy is Rey and Kylo. So that's what they're going to work on. And I also think they are gonna make Skywalker babies. I'm sorry, I don't know what they're gonna be called, their last name, but there will be Skywalker babies for sure. And right now we have two people that I think would like to do it, right? So
I love it. That's perfect.
So about that, I'm super confident. So this is it for the speculation and stuff and leaks. Be careful, be aware of leaks. So-called leaks. Is there anything else we would like to talk about?
Well, just want to remind everybody that Star Wars Celebration is happening and it's in Chicago. And I'm still going because I live very close by. You're coming, Denise, right?
I'm coming. I got the tickets and I still have to see the rest, but I'm definitely coming. So we're going to be there.
Yes, you guys, it's a great opportunity to see the positive side of the fandom. So anybody who's fatigued, this is the place to go to restore your faith in all this thing because it's a wonderful experience.
Okay, so this was it, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, leave a comment right down in the comments. We really like it. If you like us, also leave a like and subscribe. It would make such a difference. You can also follow us on Tumblr and on Twitter and on SoundCloud. If you have more questions or comments, you can also email us at lordsofthesith.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you again very much for listening, and may the Force be with you.